Hello, everybody. My name is Shannon Brody, and we are going to go ahead and get started. I think everyone is seeing my screen now and hopefully hearing me. So today is the first session of the 7-week technical training series that will be at the same day and time every week for the next 7 weeks. So how the format of the trainings goes is we'll have a particular subject. Today is the 4 key functions, and I'll talk technically about how to use TouchStone's features to build that particular area that we're discussing. I'm also going to talk about strategically what to be thinking about while you're doing it, techniques, why it's better to do things one way than another. And then we always end with the process of the week, and that will be where I'll highlight a library process, so a process that comes from our process library, and discuss it with you and then kind of show you how to use it in real life, like how practically it could be used in your business. Okay, so this is called the dashboard. And when everyone logs into TouchStone, you're first taken to the dashboard. So the dashboard is a place where you and your employees access processes. So when processes have been created inside of TouchStone and assigned, then they can be used and accessed through the dashboard in the control panel. So right here, I've got a control panel assigned for the manager of admin and finance. So this is, because I have a control panel assigned here, this is the box I fill on the chart. It's my function in the business. And when I select this, I can then see all the processes I'm responsible for. So this is what I mean by the dashboard is a place where people can access their processes. So here in the dashboard, if I need to do my key performance indicators, or I need to do a performance review, or write someone up for doing something incorrectly or wrong, I just click that process, and then I see the documentation inside of it. So here's a written warning form. So I can fill this out and save it back to TouchStone. So we'll be getting into a lot more about how the dashboard is used, how the control panel is used. I'm going to show it during every training to kind of give you the correlation between what you're building in TouchStone and how to use it. Here on the dashboard too, if you have a managerial control panel, you can see your employees here in management review. So I've got a bookkeeper named Mike here. There's 2 IT people. There's a receptionist. And when I click their names through management review, I see all their work that they do. So this is all Mike's work, and he's put groups here to kind of organize his processes a bit. So here inside of management review, I can keep training information. I can mark him as trained in processes. That's what this little green check mark is. So the dashboard from the management side is kind of a window into what your employees are doing inside of TouchStone. All the control panels are assigned up here in account administration. So we're going to be talking, there's a whole session on account administration, but just in case people are wondering, if you want to assign a control panel to any employee, yourself or anyone that is on your user list, this is where you go to do it. You just click their name on the user list, you go to control panel right here, and then you would see all the positions available on your org chart, and you can see that he's got a control panel for bookkeeper right here. So that's how the control panels are assigned. Also on the home screen, there's this navigation bar, which is all the way to the left here. Here you can always see you're on the dashboard. You can go to any one of the 4 key functions here on the nav. You can go to the organization chart. You can go to the report feature. So reports allows you to run reports of what people are doing on the dashboard in the control panel or also in management review. And then this is also where you access the search button. So this navigation kind of gives you a view and a way to toggle back and forth between everything in TouchStone. All the way back here to the upper right corner, someone has a question. So yeah, I am muting everyone. So everyone on the line now is muted, and that's just because what I said at the beginning about background noise. So you can hear me, but we all can't hear individual people. Having said that, if you have a question, ask me to unmute your phone. I'm happy to do that, or you can type it into the chat log. So back to the upper right-hand corner here, this little wheel icon, like I showed you before, will take you to the admin area. This little person icon right here, this allows you to get to your user settings. So basically here I can see my username, and then I can reset my password right here. Also, this in the upper right-hand corner, this will get you to the Resource Center. So all throughout TouchStone, if you look to the upper right-hand corner, you're always going to see this link, no matter what page you're on. When you click this link, it takes you to our Resource Center. So it will always open in a second window. So my TouchStone account's still open in the upper left right here, but now this is open in a second window. So here in the Resource Center, there are a lot of great things about how to use TouchStone. In the user guides area right here, if you're new to TouchStone, this getting started section can be good because it goes through some of the general questions or issues people typically have. The user guides gives you a glimpse into every aspect of TouchStone. So here's everything related to the 4 key functions. Here's everything related to the org chart, job descriptions, process tools, control panel. And if you click on any one of these links or topics, then generally it will show you a screenshot and give you a step-by-step, and then you'll also see these little videos. So this is like a short little video on how to create work plans and checklists and policy notes and uploaded files. This is things related to documenting work processes. Also, here in the Resource Center, there's a link to webinars. So inside of this section, you can watch strategy webinars as well as the technical training webinars. The video section's got getting started videos if you're new. There's this section on process of the week. So every single process that has been a part of the process of the week is a little 10, 15-minute video is here inside of this video section. So this is everything related to guiding the business, strategy, and management. So here are a ton of different library processes, and when you click on them, there's a short little video on how to use that process. So anytime you've pulled a library process and you look at it and you're thinking to yourself, like, how do I use this? If you go to the Resource Center, most of the time the process will be there, and you can watch a short little video on how to use it. This is a knowledge library. So this has articles, newsletters, or blogs in them. So if you ever want to read more about process development or topics related to that, you can go to the Knowledge Center. Contact support right here, or you can go to the upper right-hand corner here and hit it here as well under Support Plus. So this is how you get a hold of us quickly. If you have a problem to report, you can click this and then fill out what the issue is. And that's a quick way to get, it goes to our tech team and they'll assess it. So if you have any kind of an issue, if you have an idea for something you'd like in TouchStone, that's also a thing to go to contact support about. Like if there's a feature request that you have or something that you think it should do that it's not doing. Because TouchStone's a web tool, we have updates all the time, and if enough users ask for a particular feature, then we add it. Here's the contact support. If you have a question, an issue, anything, if you just want us to look at something for you, you want to meet with someone and show them what you've done and ask for feedback, whatever the situation is, support is always free, and this is a quick way to get a hold of someone. Also under the Support Plus tab here, you can register for TouchStone University. So that's a session that happens 2 times a month, and it's shorter than these technical training sessions. It's best practices, tips, and techniques for TouchStone, so you can register for that. You're all here, so you don't need to register for the technical training, but this is where you'd go to do that in the future if you ever wanted to. Any known issues, so any bugs that we're dealing with will be listed here. And then TouchStone Glossary of Terms. This is a useful area in TouchStone because there are terms and titles and things that we use like strategic and tactical or getting and doing, guiding, running, any of that you can't, what does that mean? What does that word mean? You can go here and find a definition. So now let's go back to TouchStone, and then let's go to the 4 key functions. So this is the main topic today, the 4 key functions, and I'm just going to click here so we can get a view of all 4. So when you're on the dashboard, it's kind of like you're on the front end of TouchStone where things are used. When you go inside of TouchStone to the 4 functions of the org chart, then you're where things are built and organized and developed. So that's a good thing to remember about the TouchStone organization, that now we're inside of it in the 4 key functions in the org chart right here. The dashboard is where the front end, where things you go to use things. So this is called the 4 key functions, and what this is it's a place where all of your processes are listed. So we use the term process inside of TouchStone, and it means the same thing as an SOP, a procedure, a system. It's basically a step-by-step set of directions or instructions on how that work is done. Every business has got processes in it, whether they're documented or not. There are methods and actions people are taking to get work done in your business all over the place. And these processes or this work, it flows from one to another. So one thing one person does then flows to what another person does, then flows to what another person does. And you could literally, with a flow chart and arrows and lines, you could map out everything that happens in your business. In fact, when I worked for Michael Gerber eons ago, before software of any kind was really big, we used to go to clients' locations and we'd have these big whiteboards or flip charts, and we'd literally diagram out how the processes flowed. And in the end, we'd have these massive flow charts that showed one box, an arrow, and going to a decision here. And it was kind of a fun exercise called process mapping, and it was interesting. But in the end, I don't think it was really all that useful and practical. It was a good visionary tool, but when the rubber hit the road, it wasn't very useful for employees to learn what they need to do. It was just a big strategic flow chart. It kind of showed them how their actions affect others, but in the end, there were no tasks, there were no steps, there was nothing for them to really understand and be trained on what they do. So the 4 key functions, I believe, is a much better format than massive flow charts and diagrams. It's simple. So it starts with this high-level view: getting, doing, guiding, running. Guiding the business is strategic and managerial processes. So it's a category of work inside your business for strategic and managerial work that happens. Getting the business is for marketing strategy, advertising, sales. So all the work you need to do to get new business in the door. So that's another category or function. Doing the business is operations, service delivery. It's the delivering of your products and services and all the processes related to that. Something's sold here and something's delivered here. So this is another category for any business, the delivering of what you sold. And then there's running the business, which is admin, finance, HR, IT. It's the office processes, bookkeeping. So these 4 categories are relevant for any business and industry. And from a big picture point of view, you can kind of see everything that happens within the business through one of these four lenses. When I click one of the four functions, it then takes me to the processes related to that function. So we're in doing the business, and I know that because it's right here. I clicked on it, but then also I know because it's listed here, doing the business. Once I click on a function, I can then toggle back and forth to the other functions. So here's guiding and getting and running. So I'm in doing, but if I wanted to be in running, I just click running, and then now I'm in running. And I can see running appear right here, and then the other three available. What you're looking at inside of this function, running the business, are called sub functions. So these are categories of work within this function called running the business. So we've drilled down into running, and now we're seeing more of this outline. So here we have admin, and then all the processes related to administration. We have finance, and all the processes related to finance. Financial management, which is like higher level processes related to finance, and all of them listed. Human resources, same thing. So the four key functions is like a big outline. You've got the uppermost four, you drill down into one, you see subcategories, it's an outline. You drill down into a process, and you see all the tools related to that process. So everything related to how to handle customer complaints is here inside this process. Now we can see through hyperlinks how one process, like customer complaint processing, can link to other things, like the flowchart example. So here in a work plan, and we're going to talk more about this as we get into it, you can make hyperlinks that can show where processes connect. So here in this task, we fill out the customer complaint form, and there's a hyperlink to that. At the end of a work plan, you might say, now start this process. So you could show the connection from when one process ends to when another one begins. So in a way, TouchStone itself is providing the flowchart through the hyperlinks. You just don't see it. It's not messy, and you're not meant to see it. But the connections inside a TouchStone are made. And from one process to another, you can see through the hyperlinks the connections. This right here is called the breadcrumb trail. That's what I refer to it as. This will always show you the hierarchy of the process as well. So this is in doing the business, client service subfunction. We're in the customer complaint process. So I'm just going to click back here. So the key of the four key functions is to use it to list out and organize all of your processes. So this is a strategic exercise. It's an entrepreneurial exercise to a certain degree. It's listing out everything that happens in your business. It's a powerful experience when you do it thoroughly, because you're taking what can feel like a bit of a mess and chaotic and what people do and how they feel about it and what happens here and there of your business, and you're condensing it down to a practical list of things that need to happen. So I want to go over the toolbar items right here and talk about the functions within the key features within the four key functions, and then we'll talk about some methodology for creating the four key functions. So first thing, there's this little black edit pencil here. This will allow you to change the function title. So if you don't like the getting, doing, guiding, running, if you feel like that's confusing or you just don't understand it, then you can delete this and just call this operations if you want to, or service. So then TouchStone will just edit the function title, and when you look at it anywhere in TouchStone, it's changed. So some people really like the getting, doing, guiding, running, but if you find it to be at all confusing, just change it to terms that make sense for you. You want to make TouchStone your own. The only thing I would suggest is can keep these same themes, because if you call this advertising and then you call this sales, well, you're going to run out of functions. So edit the titles, but keep the theme the same. Right here is our export arrow. So you're going to see this all throughout TouchStone. Everything in TouchStone you can print, you can export to Word, you can print to a PDF, or you can email. And everywhere you see this export arrow, which will be everywhere in TouchStone, you'll see the same options underneath it. One thing I like to say about exporting things from TouchStone out is the minute you do that, it's like you're creating another version of things. One of the benefits of TouchStone is that everything inside of it is up to date all the time. It's the most current version. There's no redundancy, there's no duplicates. It's all here, and it's all the most current version until you start exporting things. If you export a process, if you export your 4 functions, and then you have it in Word, and then you start to change it in Word, well, you can't suck back in that Word document and edit the 4 functions with it. It only comes out, it doesn't go in. So the best protocol or the best methodology is to do things inside of TouchStone. And then if you want to show someone what you've done, go up here to the URL, go right-click, copy, and then email that to them and say, hey, look at what I did inside of doing the business. What do you think? And when they get that URL, they're going to click it. As long as they're past the username and password screen, it's going to go right to TouchStone, right to what you're referring to. And then they can view it there. If you email it, for example, like this, well, now they're seeing a copy of what you did, an exported copy. So that's the difference. It's all about being paperless and being having less versions of things, getting rid of save as. Right above these 2 icons is where you control the sub-functions. So here you hover over the sub-functions here. I can add a sub-function. I can edit ones that are there. I can delete them, and then I can reorder them. So everything related to controlling the sub-functions is here under the sub-function tab. So speaking of sub-functions, we're in doing the business right now. I've changed it to operations, but we're in doing. So the sub-functions inside of doing the business are really dependent upon your industry. So if you're a production company of some kind, then you would have sub-functions related to what you produce. If you're a service company, you would have sub-functions related to your services. If you deal with materials or equipment, or you have a warehouse, then you would have sub-functions related to those things. If you're a retail establishment, then you'd have, inventory processes and inventory control and purchasing. So every industry is different for the types of sub-functions that you would have. So you really want to think, what are the categories of work within our operations? What makes sense? What are good categories? If you're struggling with that, we've seen every industry known to man inside of TouchStone. So if you need some advice or input, just email through the Resource Center and say, for my industry, what are some typical sub-functions? And we'll give you some suggestions. Having said that about doing the business, inside of guiding and getting and running, it's pretty boilerplate from industry to industry. So inside of running, it's typical to have a finance sub-function, or you could call it bookkeeping if you want to. I like this one too, financial management, because it kind of isolates the higher level finance processes. But you could just have one and call it finance and put everything related to that underneath it. Administration, pretty common for every industry. People need to answer the phone, need to organize things, need to file things. Human resources, anytime any business has employees, whether they be subcontractors or full-time employees, you need human resource processes. Recruiting and hiring, how to fire someone, your employee handbook, all the basics of human resources. IT is also another common sub-function for most businesses. Everybody's dealing with computers, so all your software, all your hardware, how to do your backups, things related to computer or information technology. So these sub-functions are pretty common inside of running the business. Over in getting the business, still pretty common from industry to industry. I always like to see a marketing strategy sub-function. So this would be for strategic things that you do for marketing. higher level things, the planning. Advertising, there should always be a way to generate leads. Almost any business out there has got to generate leads. Even if you think to yourself, well, we don't need any more leads, we do everything for word of mouth and referral. Well, you need a process for word of mouth and referral. And if you're ever really going to grow your business, you need proactive advertising methods. And then sales. So once all the leads are generated with these processes, how do you sell them? How do you convert those leads into sales? Sales management can be another good sub-function inside of getting the business. So these would be processes related to managing the sales department. And then estimating. Sometimes people with those industry businesses view estimating as a sales process, and some view it as an operational process. So it's up to you where you want to put estimating, but if that could be another common sub-function inside of getting the business. And then lastly, guiding the business. So inside of guiding, training is a good sub-function. So these would be your processes for training. Strategy, so the strategic work, the developing a plan, key indicators, classes and workshops, all the strategic ways that you guide the business. Employee management, a really essential sub-function inside of guiding the business. So these are processes that are used for every employee. They're not marketing specific or operations specific. They're company-wide processes that every employee, every manager needs to use with every employee. And then board of directors. So even if you don't have an official board of directors, anybody who's a corporation should have annual board meetings. Even if you don't want to do that, I still think it's a good idea for the entrepreneurs of the business to sit around at least once a year and discuss, where do we want the business to go? What are we doing with the business? And you can formalize those processes, just by listing them like we have here. So the first step in the 4 key functions is to list out your sub-functions. The second step is to start to add processes. So once the sub-functions have been established, then you can go one sub-function at a time, and you can start saying, okay, what processes do we need for administration? The first thing to do, I would think, is to go look in our library. So this is how you add a process, and I'll show you that in a minute. But before you start adding your own, if you're doing this brand new, go to our library. So this is the general process library. And this is a list of just typical processes related to running the business. So we're in running the business. You can see it in black right here. And now we're seeing in this library processes related to running. So these are going to be financial processes, HR, IT. So here you can get a good idea of some processes if you don't have them documented already. So oftentimes this is a good place to start. If I'm looking through this library of processes and anything looks good, you just fill in the box next to the title, and then you hit save, and then the process is added to your account. So a good way to go about it is to start here at the top and hit the drop down. These are all the sub-functions that you have added to running the business. I would start with the top one, administration, and then go through and choose everything related to administration that you want, and then save, add it. Then go back, add from process library, go to the next, finance, and then choose everything related to finance that you want. Hit save it, and then go back. So what this does is it's just putting the processes into the right sub-function to begin with. You can go select all and add them all, but then you'll have to organize them. So pull processes from the library that are that you think would be good processes for you to at least get like a head start with. If you pull a library process over, I think it's a good idea to look at it. So let's say I just pulled this budget creation process. If I look at it, I mean click it, and then over here, look at the content. If you look at the work plans, and you think to yourself, okay, this is good. I'm going to use this process. I like it. Then go back on the breadcrumb trail here and keep it. Leave it where it is, and then go to the next one, click it. Just look through these work plans. You don't have to read them thoroughly, but just look at it and again ask yourself, is this something I'm going to use in the next 6 months? Is this something I'm committed to documenting, implementing, and using? If the answer is yes, then keep it. But if the answer is no, then I would suggest you delete it. When you delete a library process, it puts it back into the library. So this is how you delete. I go to delete here. All I'm doing is holding my mouse click down and dragging. It turns green. I let go, and then I hit delete. If that was a library process, it would have put it back into the library, and I could have then I can go back to the library and download it again whenever I want to. So just remember this, because one of the things that happens is people will download every library process, and then suddenly your account is just cluttered with all these library processes that you don't even know if you want to use them, or if you're committed to doing it in the next 6 months. So delete the things that don't feel relevant to you right now, and just know that you can always go back to the library and get them later. So I would start by going through every function, all 4, going out from process library and pulling down good library processes. It gives you a head start. Then once you've done that, look at your list here and add what's missing. So you'd go add new process, and you'd put in the name of the process, and then you put it in what sub-function it belongs in, and then you hit save. If you ever see this error, it's telling you that you already have a process with that title. So I have a process somewhere in my account that's called name of the process. So I'm just going to put a 1 next to this so we can add it. This is a good feature. If I clicked here, it would take me to where that process is. It just stops you from adding redundant processes. So when I hit save there, then TouchStone will add the process. Now I put this in like this on purpose, with a capital here and a not capital and a capital and a not capital, just to make the point that if you don't develop a protocol for how you're going to list your processes, then you end up with things looking just different based on whoever feels like doing it. So come up with a protocol for it. If you're going to do all caps, then do all caps. I think that ends up not looking good, but if you want to do all caps, do all caps. If you want to do all lowercase, do all lowercase for everything. The typical methodology for titles that most people are used to is that the first letter of every word is capitalized. And if you have an and or a of or a then, it's not. So think about, or an A like this. So think about consistency when you're putting in your process titles. Process titles should be short and specific. So they shouldn't be sentences. It should be 3 words or 4 at the most, 2, 1. So name that process. The library processes will help you, because when you download those, you're getting some good ideas like recruiting, interviewing, employee termination. This isn't saying how to recruit good employees. It's not a sentence. It's a specific title. This is a way of naming things or identifying them without getting really descriptive. Now, when you add a process, you can also put in an objective, which is more like a sentence or a phrase: screen and hire new employees. So if you have written them out like sentences or phrases, and you want to correct that, and when I'm looking at people's accounts, this is often some suggestions I make. Think about the title, screen and hire new employees, and turn that into a short, specific title like recruiting, and then put what was the title into this objective field. We're going to go back. So add new process right here. Think of short, specific, clear titles. Think of a protocol for how you list your titles. First word capitalized. Another thing to be thinking about when you're adding your titles, there is such a thing as getting too broad with the titles. and there is such a thing as getting too narrow with the titles. So this is kind of the art or the strategy of coming up with your 4 functions list. So an example of something too broad would be if I had a process and I just called it finance. So I added a process called finance, and then inside of that process, let's just assume this one is it, I have everything related to finance listed here. There'd be 50 work plans, and it's just too broad. It's too much inside of one process. Another example that I just saw the other day, just going to getting the business, somebody had a process and they called it sales. And it was way too broad because you can see sales is a sub-function. It's a category of work that holds many processes. If you have a process called sales and then you put everything related to sales inside of it, it's going to be too confusing as to what's going on in it. And you also lose the ability to assign those pieces to employees. So every process listed on the 4 functions can be assigned to a position on the org chart, assigned accountability. So if I have somebody who does the welcome package and somebody who sets the first appointment and somebody who does the follow-up, if I have a process called sales and all of this is inside of it, well, then I'm going to have to link that whole process to every position who has a piece of it, and then it gets confusing for everyone about who does what inside of that process. Then an example of things being too narrow. So that was an example of things being too broad. So here's an example of things being too narrow. Let's go back to running the business here. So inside of every process, so here's one called accounts payable, you can create work plans. And the work plans are a step-by-step for how to do that work. So like here's a work plan for how to do check deposits, a step-by-step. So if you have a process called accounts payable right here, then everything related to accounts payable, how to pay by check, how to pay by invoice, how to make bank deposits, all that is inside of this process. This is a good way to do it. Combine like results. If it wasn't done this way, then every work plan here, bank deposit, check payments, credit cards, these would all be processes on the 4 functions list. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that other than the fact that it just creates more processes. So we've got 6 work plans here. We just go back to finance here. Imagine if every one of these processes had 6 work plans in it and we made those processes instead of work plans. So now I've just quadrupled the amount of processes I have listed on my 4 functions list. Now, again, it's not wrong. It's just making it, in my opinion, more to deal with. So it's a better protocol. It's a better methodology to combine like things. But here again, keep in mind getting too broad and getting too narrow. So here's another example. Here's a process called recruiting. If I click on this process, I should see everything related to how to recruit employees. So how to prepare for the recruiting, an interview script, sending no thank you letters. There's a video on it. So everything related to how to recruit, screen, and hire new employees is here. Now I could take all these things and make them process titles, but again, that is creating more than what's necessary. Combine like results at this level. Anything related to recruiting should be inside the recruiting process. Here's another example. This is called hiring administration. So all the administrative side of hiring, everything related to that is inside of this. So how to do drug testing, how to check their driving record, how to review their resume, all of that is here. And if I'm the person who does the administrative side of recruiting, I know that I can go to this process and everything I need is inside of it. Okay. So a little more functionality about the 4 key functions. Remember, you can reorder your sub-functions. When you add them, they toggle left to right. But right here, you can reorder them if you want to like move them around. If you want to move processes around, it's all drag and drop. So I can drag and drop this from here to here to here just by holding my mouse click down and dragging it around. If I have a process inside of one function, so we're in running the business, and I want to move it to another function, like getting the business, I just take that process and I drag it on top of that function, and I let go. And now it's showing me the sub-functions inside of getting the business. So it's basically asking, well, which sub-function do you want this in? And if I choose a sub-function and then I hit move, now that process is out of this function. It's out of running. And TouchStone's dropped it into getting. So it's here, or wherever I put it, right here. So if you want to move a process from one entire function, one of the four key, to another, again, take it, drag it on top, let go, choose the function you want to, the sub-function you want to move it into within that function, and then hit move. Now, this happens probably, I don't know, a couple times a month. Someone will say, my process disappeared. I had this process and now it's just disappeared. Well, 9 times out of 10, what's happened is you've moved it from one function to another, and then you can't remember where you moved it to. It gets lost. So if that ever happens, go up to the search and just put in a partial or a full name of what you lost, and then hit search, and then you're going to see where it is in TouchStone. Things don't just disappear in TouchStone. The only way to make it disappear is to delete it, and you have to be pretty intentional about deleting things. You take it, drag it, let go, and then you have to, for a second time, say, okay, delete that process. So that's the only way things get deleted. They don't disappear. That's the way they get deleted. Other than that, it's usually somebody has moved it around in a particular way, which causes you not to be able to find it. So remember, the search is a good way to see that. More about moving things. If you're inside of a process, so let's say that you got too narrow with a process, or you got too broad. And based on what I'm saying, you're like, God, I think I need to break this process apart, or I think I need to combine two processes. So if you want to combine two processes or break them apart, it's all about moving the tools from one to the other. So if I wanted to combine this customer complaint process with another process, then I would have to take all these tools and move them from here to the other process. So there's a little icon right here that's Move Process Tool. So I'm on this customer complaint processing work plan, and if I click Move Process Tool, then I'm going to hit the drop down. Now I'm looking at the sub-functions. So I choose the sub-function of where the process that I'm going to move this into lives. And then I hit, there's all the processes, and I choose the process I want to move this into, and then I hit save. And now that work plan is gone from here, and it's in that other process. So you're basically just emptying out the process, moving it into another one, and then when this process is empty, the title will turn red, which lets you know it's empty, and then you just delete it. And now you've combined those two processes. So the same is true as if you want to separate two processes. You create a new process title, and then you move processes out of one into the other. So it's pretty easy to shift things around if you've built things together or separately. To move them around is pretty easy. Let me talk about the color coding here for a minute. There's a legend for it right here. A red process means that the process is not started yet. It's just a title. So this one, if I click on it, that's red, you'll see there's nothing here. There's no tools that have been developed yet. Nothing's been done yet. It's just a title. The minute I go and build a work plan, so now I'm putting a work plan in this process called purchasing technical equipment, and I hit create. Of course, I knew that was going to happen. More of the redundancy control. So I hit create. Now I've got a work plan in this process. So technically, according to TouchStone, it's been started, like somebody started documenting it. So if we go back here to client service, you'll see it's blue now. So that lets you know there's something inside of it. It's been started, it's in process. When I'm finished with the documentation, if I select this process, let's say I've developed all the work plans, checklists, everything's done in my opinion, then I fill this box in that says process documentation completed. So it's good to go now. And if we look back at the 4 functions, you see it's turned black. So this is just a way of tracking where you're at with your processes. Everything in red hasn't been started yet. Everything black is done. Everything blue is in process. It's begun. Somebody's documenting it. So at a quick glance of the 4 functions, you can tell what the status of the documentation is. Sometimes I see in people's accounts that I don't know if it's an employee who's done it or somebody who doesn't quite understand what it means for something to be thoroughly documented, has gone in and just marked everything complete. So inside the process, there could be a work plan, but it's not done. Nobody's looked at it. It hasn't been implemented. The manager hasn't looked at it to say that it's good. They've just marked it as complete and moved on. If you have that, it's a really good idea to unmark it as complete, because there's a thing that happens psychologically when the process is complete. Anyone who looks at it says, oh, well, it's done. If it's not done, unmark it as complete, because this is manual. So you see now this is blue again. The color coding also shows you what you've put in your public folder, and that's the green P and the check mark. So here on the dashboard, there's this folder called public, and this is for processes that are company-wide information. These are processes, or they should be processes, that every employee needs to have access to and needs to use. It's not the accountability of 1 or 2 or 3 people. It's everybody in the company. It's a resource for everybody, or everybody is accountable for it. That, if you can define the process like that, then the public folder is a good place for it. So to put a process in the public folder, you select the process, and then you go and fill in this check mark, process, make process public and available to all users. And then when you go to the dashboard here, you'll see that process. Now it's been added to the dashboard. When somebody selects the process from the dashboard, they can't edit or change anything here. They can just view what's here. So that's one of the features of the dashboard. Anything that people access there, you can just view it and use it. You can't edit or change it. The only way to go and edit and change things is to have the right access and to be here on the Process Tools page, to click it where you can edit and change it. You can take things out of the public folder just as easy. You just uncheck the box and now it's out of the public folder. So that is the color coding. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, this is a good question. So the person's asking about linking processes to job descriptions. I'm just condensing the question. So the question is, can you link what's inside of a process to a job description? And so the answer is no. The process itself, key performance indicators, and everything in it is linked to a job description. I can't take a specific work plan within a process and link that to a job description. It's the whole process and everything in it. So if we look over here at my organization chart, we go here to this position. This is everything that's been linked to the manager of admin and finance's job description. If I am accountable for key performance indicators, and the marketing director and the operations manager are also accountable for this, well, then this process gets linked to all 3 of our job descriptions and everything inside of it. If I have a process called budget creation, say, and inside of this process, there's a work plan for the finance admin manager, and there's a work plan for the bookkeeper. So maybe the bookkeeper has to run reports that I use to then create the budget. Well, then this process would be linked to both of our job descriptions. And there would have to be a note in the work plan title for who does what. What's the bookkeeper do, and what does the admin finance manager do? So that's a perfectly acceptable way of doing it. Having said that, if there's confidential information inside of a process that one person shouldn't see what the other is doing, like I don't want the bookkeeper to know the steps that I go through to create the budget for whatever reason, then you shouldn't put the work plan for the bookkeeper and the work plan for the admin finance manager together under this one process. You should break it apart. So do budget creation, finance, budget creation, reports. So create two titles, and then one would be what's linked to the bookkeeper, and the other would be what's linked to the admin finance manager. So that's a very good reason for breaking a process apart and making it two processes. And the reason would be if there's something confidential within it. One position shouldn't know what the other one's doing. It's both related to budgeting, but one shouldn't know what the other one's doing. So that would be a reason to separate it. On the other hand, sometimes it's useful for one position to know what the other's doing. So if it's useful for the bookkeeper to know what I do, the manager does in creating the budget, and how what that person creates in the reports then helps, then by all means keep it together. If there's no harm in keeping it together, and in fact it is useful, then keep it together. Okay, so we're going to do the process of the week here quickly. I have a few more questions, but I'm going to email people directly to answer those offline just because I didn't keep good track of time here. So the process I wanted to highlight, I think, is a really great library process for the beginning of any year. So we're in January now. We're in the middle of the year. It's a new year. We're all going into 2019. This is a new opportunity. It's a new foot forward, and it's a great time to start thinking about your vision. Start thinking about your strategic plan for the year. And there's a great process in the library for doing this. It's called strategic planning. So I'm in guiding the business because this is a strategy type thing. This is a guiding thing. So here in the library guiding the business, you go to general processes, and then you're going to see there's a lot of stuff in here related to good strategy, but the strategic planning process is here, right here. It's grayed out because it's already in my account. So you can download the strategic planning process. This isn't long and complicated. I mean, it's got a lot in it, but it doesn't. I'm going to show you how simple it can be. The first thing you can do is you can watch this video. So this is Clayton Mask, who is one of the founders of Infusionsoft, which is a really great software tool that we use. They're really entrepreneurial thinkers, and he's a really he's not only an amazing entrepreneur, but he's also a good teacher. So this is a link to one of his videos on strategic planning, and this strategic planning process here in TouchStone is kind of modeled after the way they do it in Infusionsoft. So this gives a 1 through 5, the basic steps of creating a strategic plan. So you can go through and watch these or read these work plans. So this is like a step-by-step for, how to create your vision. There's these 3 key pieces that this process teaches, like purpose. What's your purpose? What are your values? What are your mission? This values thing, this is a really great thing to do for your company. Just a set of your core values. It helps with customer service. It helps with client complaints. It helps with sales and marketing. For your employees to really understand, what do you stand for? What's important to you? Because then they can gauge everything else off of that. If it's one of the core standards we have here at Business Design Corp is to do the right thing. That doesn't always mean that the customer is always right, but we always strive to do the right thing, no matter how hard it is. Whether it be admitting something that was wrong or making it right, we always strive to do the right thing. So whatever comes up related to that, if the employee is asking a question or some issue happens, a manager, it's very common to hear them say, well, what would be the right thing? How would we do the right thing here? So that's just an example of how these core values can really feed into your processes and how your employees kind of think and view the business. So creating the vision. Down here, there's these documents that I think are really useful. So this is one called Annual Priorities. So this is where it can be really simple. Even if you choose to ignore all these work plans, just if it's overwhelming to you, just ignore them. Sometimes people don't do strategic planning because it's so overwhelming. It's like, I don't even know what to do, and how do I even begin? So if you're feeling that way about it, then begin here. So develop a list of annual priorities. What do you want to accomplish in 2019? Click this open. You can edit and change it right here. List out what your annual priorities are. What are the things you want to do? They can be broad, like increase sales. They can be goals like better customer service. They can be numbers like 70% conversion rate. So put in what your goals are here, annual priorities. You can add more cells, you can add more rows. Then in the description field, just put in a little bit more detail about this. So to increase sales, what are you going to need to do? So more advertising, more money spent on that. Again, these are just notes. This isn't like any kind of detailed planning. So create a list of your annual priorities. Then go and say, okay, Q1, what are we going to do in Q1? So now we're breaking it down into quarters. We're saying, what is a reasonable goal for Q1? Of all these annual priorities, what are we going to focus on in the first quarter of the year? So if you want to increase sales, then you're going to have to, in some situations, raise your conversion rate or get more leads. So if you're going to increase sales by the end of the year, you probably should start at the beginning of the year with developing more advertising techniques or working on your sales process in order to increase the conversion rate. So you put in the quarterly priorities from the annual list and then put in action to take. So if one of the quarterly priorities is to the 70% conversion rate for sales, then the action to take is work on sales process. Whatever else, work on, so you list out these actions. So we're taking the goal here, and then we're listing the steps or the actions to take. And then this is really the key to making it happen. You can say in the action to take who needs to be involved in that, who's going to help work on it, and then you go to the next quarter. Now, when you're monitoring this, if things didn't get accomplished in Q1, then drag them down to Q2. This happens all the time in my department. You know, we don't plan for it to happen that way, but there'll be quarterly priorities that just don't get done. And then a lot of times there's legitimate reasons for it, but we just don't forget that. We drag them from here down to here. So once you fill all this out, you can save it, and then it can be edited and changed as you go along, and things can be cut and pasted from one area to the other. So this is just a simple way to kind of think about what are the actions you want to take and make it a little tangible. If you want to get more elaborate with it, there's all these work plans you can follow to create a vision and to plan meetings around it. So there's like ways to come up with agendas and the rhythm of the meetings, which basically means how often are you going to meet about these things. So this is the strategic planning process. There's also in the Resource Center, there's more about strategic planning. So feel free to come here if you want even more information about that. Thanks for coming, everybody. Next week, we're going to talk about organization strategy. This is always a fun webinar. So that's going to be next week, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.